The NL Central is wide open for the Cincinnati Reds to win in 2026. We'll break it all down coming up on Chatterbox Reds. Nick, welcome in. Everybody else, welcome in as well. Appreciate you tuning in as always. I'm your host, Craig Sandlin, joined by Nick Kirby. Nick, how we doing?
Doing good. Craig, we got a big T-shirt sale up on Chatterbox Sports. Get 2 shirts for $40 with the promo code DOUBLE. Some really good merchandise that we're putting out for Chatterbox Reds. 3 different designs for you to look through. Also shirts for all of our other shows. All the proceeds benefit the creators of your content here on Chatterbox Sports. So hopefully a way to get you some gear, maybe give it to a loved one who enjoys our content. So be sure to check that out. Chatterboxsports.com/store.
That's right. And we appreciate the support, not only with the t-shirt sale, but if you wouldn't mind, make sure you drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications so you know every time we release a new video. And most importantly, when we go live to discuss any breaking news here with the Cincinnati Reds, Nick and I always do our best to get live as soon as we can after news breaks. Now, we look at the NL Central, and obviously the Milwaukee Brewers, they had their magic in 2025, as they have somehow found a way to do, but yet again, expected to be sellers this offseason. The St. Louis Cardinals also looking to be sellers. They traded away Sonny Gray plus $20 million to the Boston Red Sox in return for Richard Fitz and the Red Sox number 5 prospect, left-handed pitcher Brandon Clark. Obviously, the Cardinals are in full rebuild mode, Nick. We'll start with the Cardinals. Obviously, there's conversation to be had about the entire NL Central and the plans that are expected for this division here going into 2026. But we'll start with the news of Sonny Gray heading to the Boston Red Sox. Former Red, been linked to the Reds for the last couple of years, seemingly. Now the monkey is off his shoulder. He's officially headed to the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, interesting move here from the Cardinals. A good trade, I think, overall for St. Louis, especially with kind of where they're at, getting Sonny Gray off the books, and acquiring 2, legitimate pitchers. I think the left-handed pitcher Brandon Clark is certainly has the higher upside. He was just an A-ball though last year, but Red Sox number 5 prospect according to MLB Pipeline. Fangraphs actually had him as a top 100. They were the only publication that had him in the top 100, but nonetheless, at least a fringe top 100 prospect. Then Richard Fitz, who will pitch for the Cardinals, you assume, in 2026, was ranked as the 11th highest Red Sox prospect in 2024, 12th going into 2025. So it kind of gives them a pitcher that can at least eat some innings and stuff now. But yeah, for the Cardinals, this is a move that you would like from their perspective. Heim Bloom, getting some prospects back. Also, if you're a Cardinals fan, you'd love the fact that they sent some money to Boston to basically buy prospects. That's basically what that $20 million was to buy prospects. So from their perspective, that's good. From the Reds' perspective, it's complex because you love it that in 2026, the Cardinals aren't going to be as good. The Reds just went 6-7 against the Cardinals last year. If you want to improve your win total in 2026, start with winning more games against the Cardinals. There's certainly hopefully a lot more out there, and it'll be interesting to see how deep the Cardinals go. You would expect they probably try to move Nolan Arenado if they can get him to waive his no trade clause. They also could trade guys like Contreras. There's been talks about guys like Brendan Donovan, who has a lot more value than these other guys that are being paid a lot of money. But Brendan Donovan, he's an attractive piece. Could they move a guy like Alec Burleson? Could they move a guy like Andre Palante? It'll be interesting kind of how deep the Cardinals go, Craig, because I think kind of going into last year, the Cardinals were a little bit more apprehensive just to go full rebuild because they've gotten such great fan support over the years. But last year, they didn't really get great fan support. There was a lot of games you were looking at Bush and you're like, oh my God, there's no one here. And that just, in my opinion, a lot of times gives ownership more fuel to put the floor to the pedal in terms of rebuild.
Yeah, Cardinals finished 4th in the division last year, sitting at 78 and 84. 78 and 84. Obviously not the type of Cardinal season that they've come to expect. But you mentioned new president of baseball operations, Chaim Bloom. He's on the record. Look, this is a multi-year process for them. They are building a farm system and trying to get to a more flexible financial position. And so Nolan Arenado certainly makes a lot of sense for them to try and move off of. Sonny Gray was just what feels like at least the first of what could be multiple moves this offseason for them. Obviously, the winter meetings just about a week away at this point. I believe they're the December 7th through the 10th. So certainly going to be keeping our eyes on the St. Louis Cardinals for them. But ultimately, it's interesting, and I'm interested in your perspective here. It feels almost a bit parallel to the Reds philosophy in terms of building up the farm system, financial flexibility, trading players when there's value. Obviously, trading guys like Sonny Gray late in their contract with sending $20 million is not what the Reds would do. Don't get me wrong there. But I think long term, when you're talking about the Cardinals' plans, seems more in line with the Cincinnati Reds' long-term plans than it does with, the Cardinals of old, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're someone like me who, looks always long-term and looks big picture, you kind of want the Cardinals to screw up their rebuild. You kind of don't want them to go all in on the rebuild. You kind of want them to have to do it, because we've seen, not just with the Reds, but a lot of other teams, when you have to rebuilds, it ends up being worse than you, or you end up in a worse spot than you were before. The Cardinals at the end of the season ranked 12th in terms of their farm system. The Reds were 8th. The Cardinals obviously just getting another prospect. They're probably moving closer up, and I would bet by the end of the season they probably catch the Reds. But you don't want to just be catching the Reds if you're the Cardinals, because you don't have as good of a big league team. You don't have an Elly De La Cruz. You don't have certainly don't have anywhere close to the rotation that the Reds have. So yeah, it's good and bad, and I can kind of feel both sides of this. Like, in some ways, we've looked at kind of what the Reds have done, and I've kind of wanted the Reds to continue to think more big picture, and it's kind of felt like they did that for a while, and now it's just like, we're just doing whatever we can now to kind of win. And so if that's what the Reds are going to do, if the Reds are going to make a big trade this offseason and kind of blow up their farm system, well, you want the Cardinals to be as bad as they possibly can right now and not really worry about the future, because honestly, by the time the Cardinals come back around to being good, the Reds will probably be going to a rebuild of their own, right? So it kind of would align with the window. But if the Reds were kind of doing the whole Milwaukee Brewers strategy, where you're trying to win now and trying to win in the future, and really having your hands well in both sides, then I don't think you necessarily would love the Cardinals kind of going into a full rebuild, because they're probably going to come out of it, especially with a guy like Chaim Bloom, who I think has a pretty good chance of getting them back in the right direction. They come out of it a lot stronger, and they're going to have more resources than the Reds when they do get out of it.
Yeah, and that's a big piece of it, obviously, is the resources, right? So you go out, you build a nice young core through the trades that they're talking about, through the draft, through other realms. But the difference is that when they get that core together, as you mentioned, they've got the flexibility and the financial ability to really build around that core, versus the Reds, who may have the core in place, but then what do they do with it, right? Like, their marquee signings, Mike Moustakas, Jeimer Candelario, like, nowhere near the level of major signings that someone like the St. Louis Cardinals could potentially make, at least given their past financial abilities, right? And you talk about the fan base and how much they're going to be willing to weather through all of this rebuilding process. But, let's say the Cincinnati Reds and the St. Louis Cardinals have a very similarly ranked farm system going into 2029, like who do you trust more to put high quality veterans around that young core to be able to actually build it into a World Series team? Like that's the real question. For 2026, absolutely feels like they might as well be out of contention today. Like them and the Pirates are going to be competing for who finishes last in the division. But long term, I think the Reds have to be pretty concerned about what it means for them to kind of go through this organizational reset, because they've had success in the past about, homegrown players. So there's absolutely got to be concern. And as you mentioned, some hope that maybe they completely botch this.
Yeah, and that's again, it's why that I've kind of advocated for a long time that you've got to stockpile prospects. Is the only way you're going to compete with the Cardinals, and especially the Cubs, who have even more resources than the Cardinals. You have to out prospect these guys, or you're just not going to compete, or you're going to go all in and have one or two shots, which isn't really very smart either, in my opinion, because it's so hard in baseball to do anything of value with like one or two shots. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. It'll be interesting to see how the Cardinals do. And it definitely could be really good for the Reds, at least in 2026, because if that team really goes through a full rebuild, it gives you at least a chance to maybe stockpile some wins on one team, because the NL Central was really good in 2025. I mean, the Brewers won the most games in baseball. Cubs, I think people kind of forgot that the Cubs were still really good, Craig. I think they were so far behind the Brewers. Well, the Cubs still won 92 games of their own. That was the only one game less than the Dodgers. Like, that's how good the Cubs were last year. And then obviously the Cardinals ended up being way more competitive than we thought. I mean, they were in it almost until the end, even after trading players at the trade deadline. And yeah, the Pirates only won 71 games, but that's a lot more wins than the Rockies, who won 43 at the bottom of the NL West. How about the Nationals, who won 66 at the bottom of the NL East? The White Sox, who won 60 games at the bottom of the AL Central. So like the Pirates were no slouch either at the bottom, and they were kind of in some ways, I think, a bad matchup for the Reds, just because they were so dominant at pitching, and the Reds didn't really have the offense to kind of counter that you're just always going to be in tight games against the Pirates team that could pitch, not just from starting pitch. They had a great bullpen too.
Yeah, it's funny. We, going into 2025, we talked about how we thought that this might be a down year for the Cubs. We thought it might be a down year for the Brewers.
I didn't say I didn't say the Cubs. I thought the Cubs were really good.
We were concerned that the Brewers were going to do their typical Brewer magic, though. I think you talked about that at multiple times throughout the offseason last year, about how the Brewers just always find a way, and how a lot of people had written them off. And then obviously they go out and they win 97 games last year. So yeah, I mean, it was, I think, to your point, it probably was one of, if not the best divisions top to bottom in baseball. I think the AL East probably was better. But other than that, like, I think those are really the two divisions that you're talking about competing for best division in baseball last year. So yeah, I mean, certainly 2025 was a interesting one for the NL Central, but yet here we are, we're going into 2026, and again, I think the Cubs will be good again, but is the division open for the taking? And are the Reds able to capitalize on that and try and make a run for the NL Central in 2026? We'll break down the Brewers, Cubs, and Pirates in just a moment. But first, we want to take a second to acknowledge the sponsors that make Chatterbox Reds possible.
Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, It's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
All right, Nick, I want to talk first about the Pittsburgh Pirates. We'll do a rundown of the 3 remaining teams, but the Pittsburgh Pirates seem to be the most intriguing offseason story of the NL Central right now, just based on some of the public comments from their leadership team so far. A team that is expected to be increasing their payroll by somewhere between 30 and 40 million going into 2026, have been linked to almost all of the big free agent names, including Kyle Schwarber. What's your expectations for this offseason with the Pittsburgh Pirates? Can they actually take that step to become, I'll say a respectable franchise? Where do you think they end up as we head into 2026?
The Pirates are kind of the opposite of the Brewers, where the Brewers, I've said, I'll never doubt them again. I'm just never going to say the Brewers they're due for a down year. I'm never going to say that again. And I also just at this point have reached where I can't keep hyping up the Pirates. I keep saying, hey, they're better than you think, because they keep letting me down. And I say letting me down, like I'm not really happy. I'm not really like disappointed that they let me down, but they are finished below my expectations almost every year. Having said that, you can't overlook their pitching. This is a team with starting pitching that's unbelievable. With Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller had a down year, but he's still good. They've got prospects like Bubba Chandler. They've got legitimate weapons with their pitching. That Connor Griffin's another one that's close as well. And it's just like, if they figure out the hitting even just a little bit, man.
And that didn't even mention
really
Jared
tough.
Jones.
Yeah, Jared Jones coming back off Tommy John.
Yep. Is he going to be pitching in 2026? I don't remember his timeline.
I don't remember either. But yeah, they're just their pitching is incredible.
He had surgery in May, so expectation is that he could be back in game activity in early 2026. So yeah.
And it's tough. And if they hit on the right pieces, but when you only have a little bit to spend, as we know with the Reds, it's really hard to hit on that. But it'll be interesting to see with the Pirates. I just think this is going to be a team that you can't cry wolf that they're going to be competitive. I've reached that point with them, but also you can't overlook them as well. And it feels like at some point that team is going to break through, and breakthrough might only be like an 83 win season like the Reds had last year, but that would still be another problem for the Reds.
Yeah, they need to add a bat for sure. Obviously the pitching staff has been phenomenal for them, and you just, all you have to do is look at Paul Skeens and you understand pretty quickly the challenges that the 2025 Pittsburgh Pirates faced. This is, a team that had Paul Skeens with a 1.97 ERA, who finished at 500 on the year, 10-10 after pitching in 32 starts, went 187 plus innings with a 1.97 ERA and ended up at 10-10. So that tells you everything you need to know about this Pittsburgh Pirates team and why they were where they were in 2025. But if you go out and add a bat or two, they certainly could be in contention with this pitching staff that they have. The question is going to be, what is the cost? And you mentioned the fact that they're willing to spend estimated payroll somewhere in the $100 million range, which again isn't like giant by any means, but it's a pretty significant increase for them. And they don't have to be great offensively. They just have to be better than they were. And so what does that mean for them in 2026 is yet to be seen, but it's not a team that I don't think you can immediately write off like you have been able to in years past, at least not yet. Certainly we'll see how this offseason continues to progress and see what they're able to do. But as it sits here today, based on expectations, I'm not sure that you can write off the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2026 just yet.
Yeah, and they have the number one prospect in baseball in Connor Griffin right now, who's only Double-A. Could they trade him? I think the Pirates are a team that likes to trade, or even Bubba Chandler, who's number 14. I mean, Seth Hernandez, 27. I mean, any of those guys could easily be the main piece for Byron Buxton. I don't think you would move Griffin for Buxton, but could you package one of those guys to go get Byron Buxton? I mean, you put him on that Pirates team, if you're able to get him to stay healthy, which he's done better of late than he did through most of his career. I mean, that could completely transform that lineup. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how far they go this offseason, how aggressive they are, or if they just continue to, kind of stay the course with just building this unstoppable pitching and hoping at some point they can develop the hitting around it. It's going to be a game, I think, of chicken in terms of how patient that front office and I guess that ownership is as well.
Well, reported expectations right now is that they're going to be willing to move some of their pitching depth to try and take advantage. They also have some aging contracts that they may be worth exploring. Guys like Mitch Keller, obviously from the pitching side, but also guys like Brian Reynolds could potentially become a piece that there's conversations around, not only in terms of is he a trade piece, but does he move to DH and give up his outfield position, or what does that look like? So certainly lots of options for the Pirates in 2026, just like the Reds have lots of options in 2026 as well, which we talked about on a separate podcast. All right, let's talk about the two teams that are perennially at least the top teams in the division at this point. I want to start with the Brewers and how they continue to do what they do despite every offseason. They're selling guys at their peaks. You're looking at guys that they trade and you're like, all right, well, how could they possibly replace that? And then they go out and they get what they get from Freddie Peralta or, guys that nobody expected. Expectation is that they may move some big names again this offseason, and yet somehow they still continue to replace. So what are your expectations for 2026 for the Milwaukee Brewers?
Same old with them. I mean, I think there's a good chance they trade Freddie Peralta this offseason, who was by far their best pitcher. And you look, it's like, how will they replace that? But they somehow always find a way. Their pitching development is just really unmatched, and you have to always be mindful of that. Yeah, their offense. I mean, Jackson Churio didn't even really, I guess, hit his full potential. He probably had a season he wasn't as good as Ellie De La Cruz, but kind of like that type of where he was good. It was a valuable player, but I don't think he hit anywhere close to his ceiling, and he's still not even 22 years old. Will Yelich ever show any signs of aging? I mean, that's kind of a question. I mean, he's now 34 years old. I mean, please God, can he get some of the Mike Moustakas juice in his blood? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. The Brewers, you just look at them on paper and you don't understand how they win 97 games. Like, you understand why the Brewers win 85 games. Like, that's not hard. Like, I know pitching and defense, you can pretty much win 85 games with that. How they get to that high of a number, I don't know. And does it swing back? You hope and pray, but I'm not gonna bank on it by any means.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw the beginning of some of that pitching depth last year. Obviously, young guys like Jacob Mizorowski came in and absolutely took the MLB by storm. Struggled down the stretch for sure, but was a guy that certainly showed promise. Quinn Priester was a cast-off, seemingly, that they turned into just an ace basically in the back end of their rotation out of nowhere. But you look down at their AAA rotation, and they're certainly ready to backfill. Guys like Robert Gasser saw some play here in 2025. Coleman Crowe, Carlos Rodriguez, both in the wings, ready to go. So Logan Henderson, even a top 100 prospect, on not even 24 years old yet. So they definitely have depth at the pitching rotation that potentially could be similar to what we talked about with the Pittsburgh Pirates, where do they build around that and continue to try and have a dominant pitching staff? or do they use those as trade chips? And obviously Freddie Peralta being on the aging side, not even aging side, but on the potential list for offseason moves, to be able to build around guys like Mizorowski and Chad Patrick and Logan Henderson and Quinn Priester. And like it's just unbelievable how long this list is of guys that, if we're being completely honest, we're like no names. And then the Brewers get a hold of them and somehow turn them into potential all-stars. And,
the most positive thing with the Brewers is like the last couple years, like they have a really good farm system. Obviously, they've continued to do that year after year. They were ranked number 4 in the latest MLB pipeline update. But if you look through the last couple years, like let's go back to 2023, Jackson Chourio was the number 8 prospect in baseball. Sal Frelick was number 30. And they were like obviously in the big leagues. 2024, Chourio was still there at number 2. Mizorowski was there at number 33. Joey Ortiz was in the top 100. If you look now going into the 2026 season, all of their top 3 prospects, so not all the top 100, because they have Jefferson Acquira at number 84, who's a catching prospect. But their top 3 are all ETAs of 2027 or later. In fact, their top prospect Made is only 18 years old. Luis Pena, their second best prospect, is only 19 years old. So maybe the Brewers are finally hitting a little bit of a lull in terms of the guys that can actually be massively impact players that come up and help them. I guess that's really the most positive thing, is they may not have. I hate even. I'm nervous even say it, but they may not have as much reinforcements, at least in 2026, as we've seen the last couple years, where it just felt like someone gets hurt, they just plug and play.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a baseball card guy, right? So we got Bowman, which is focused on prospects, and the Brewers have been a team for the last couple of years, at least, that have been very highly regarded in terms of the breaking space, and certainly, you know, you mentioned Jesus Made, there Jefferson Cuero, amongst other guys, but then they also have guys that come out of nowhere like Jacob Mizorowski that nobody was really talking about even before this season. And he comes out of nowhere and they find a way to turn him into all-stars. And so the Brewers will be the team yet again to watch, but also could be a team that makes a lot of moves this offseason. And you'd like to sit here and say that at some point, maybe they'll come back to bite them. And maybe at some point they won't be able to replenish to the same level that they've been able to do it for the last couple of years. Will 2026 be that year? I guess we'll wait and see. Final team in the division to talk about, the Chicago Cubs. Nick, again, you mentioned 92 wins in 2025. Somewhat quietly, I guess. But 2026 is kind of a big year for them because they've got a lot of guys on expiring contracts going into 2026. After the year, guys like Nico Horner, Shota Imanaga, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, all coming up on the end of their contracts. And so feels like a bit of a make or break year for the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how far they go into this offseason, like how aggressive they are, because it's kind of felt like they're looking at players, but they're not really like in on all the top free agents, or at least we're not hearing them in on all. We're hearing like they're not really going to really try with Kyle Tucker. And I think Kyle Tucker kind of got forgotten about in terms of like how impactful he was to the Cubs in 2025, because he got hurt and really wasn't an impact player for them in the last month and into the playoffs. He was still a 4.5 win player. Like, he was a major reason why the Cubs won 92 games because of what he did the first 3-4 months of the season. So I think he's a bigger loss than maybe gets led on to be, but the Cubs are protected. I mean, man, that lineup just 1 through 9, even without Tucker, is still really good, man. There's just, I mean, every single play, like Dansby Swanson, let's look at like WRC plus from last year. He was like 99. Matt Shaw was 93, but you know, Matt Shaw was batting 9th. Like, he's got as much, he's got a lot of talent there at third base. I mean, they just have above average hitters up and down that lineup. And you can, again, that's a good strategy to win a lot of games. Their pitching, I guess, is the question. Obviously, you mentioned Imanaga. He really struggled. Ended up bringing him back after that whole weird. He was able to opt out, and then they brought him back.
Qualifying offer.
Yeah, with the qualifying offer. So it's kind of interesting. Cade Horton broke onto the scene, but could he have a sophomore slump? Maybe. I don't know. Matthew Boyd was great. Is he able to kind of repeat that now? He's going to be 35 years old. Jameson Taillon's also getting up there in age. He's 34 years old. Justice Steele coming back off Tommy John surgery. Credit to the Cubs, though, man. When they lost him earlier in the year, I thought that was going to be a much bigger deal than it ended up being. Just because I thought he was such a big piece because they didn't have that starting pitching depth. So I'm fascinated to see what the Cubs do this offseason, just because I really have no idea how much they're going to add or not.
Yeah, starting pitching is the biggest question for the Cubs, I think. And obviously we talked about a number of them, but the age of some of these guys is certainly something that you have to keep your eye on. Matthew Boyd will be 35 this season. Imanaga, again, only a 1-year deal with the qualifying offer, but he'll be 33. Jameson Taillon will be 35 next year. Colin Ray is going to be 36. So, getting up there with guys that are not necessarily considered like top of the rotation type of guys. Like Matthew Boyd was good and Cade Horton was unbelievable in his rookie year. But like, what can you expect out of that rotation in 2026 is yet to be seen. And one of the things that's interesting, Nick, that I don't have any numbers on, but the Chicago Cubs don't have a single starting pitcher on their 40-man roster that's not on their 25. So you look at their minor league depth, none of their AAA guys are even on the 40-man roster right now. Their only ranked prospect from a starting pitching perspective is Jackson Wiggins. He was a second-round pick in 2023 by the Cubs. He's ranked number 66 overall. So certainly some talent there, but none that seem ready to like step in, right? And that's why maybe Imanaga accepting that qualifying offer was so important for the Cubs, because maybe they feel like Wiggins is still a year away. But what we've talked about with the Cincinnati Reds that you've said over and over again is that you can never have enough starting pitching. And if anything, it feels like that may be the one area that the Chicago Cubs are lacking on. Taillon missed a significant portion of 2025. What will they do with that if that happens again in 2026? We don't know that answer.
Yeah, the Cubs definitely, it feels like they need to go out and get another top of the rotation arm, or at least maybe a guy like they could gamble that could be that. Maybe like they take a shot on a guy like Zach Gallen and say, hey, like we know he has the upside. Maybe Ranger Suarez would be another guy that they could go after. But I feel like they need to add a starter, because I'm with you. That was my next point, is just like I don't see a ton of depth for them starting pitching wise. Like they have Owen Casey, who's just another top prospect they can throw into the outfield if one of their current 9 struggle. Like they're loaded offensively and position player depth wise. But yeah, I would imagine if the Cubs don't add a top of the rotation starter, a lot of their fan base will probably not be too happy going into next season, because it definitely feels like that's the piece that team just kind of desperately needs. But they also said they also need bullpen arms too, and they said they're not gonna. They already said they're not gonna go out a ton in that. So, yeah, but when you do have that deep of an offense, Craig, it can overlook some pitching that's not great too. So they're going to be good. I just don't know if they're going to be great. That's kind of where I'm at with the Cubs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who they target. Some names that have been brought up, obviously Dylan Cease before. Dylan Cease ended up signing his deal with the Blue Jays. Michael King's name has been brought up, and then Brandon Woodruff, who's a free agent now after declining his option with the Brewers, has been a name that's been brought up as well. So there's certainly expectation that they will add depth, and certainly if they don't find a way to do that in this offseason, I think you'll hear from the Cubs fans for sure. But that's the biggest question mark around the Chicago Cubs as they head into what is this, Craig Counsell's 4th year? 3rd year?
I think it's his 3rd year.
3rd year?
Yeah. Because they didn't make the playoffs in his first year, which was 2024. Okay.
Yeah. So, trying to figure out what that looks like. Obviously, they went out and gave him a huge payday, and expectation was to try and compete for a World Series, and that didn't happen in 2024. Obviously, they missed the playoffs, and then didn't happen in 2025 either. So we'll see if Craig Counsell can get back to the World Series in 2026. That'll certainly be the expectations amongst Cubs fans, but certainly a lot of questions still to be answered across the NL Central. And so, Nick, I'll ask you now, as we sit here today on early December of 2025. Didn't prep you for this, so if you need a second, that's fine. But give me your 2026 NL Central final standings as we sit here today.
I guess kind of a power rankings type thing. I mean, I'd put the Cubs number one. I just think on paper they have too much talent not to be number one. I'd put the Brewers number two. I'd put the Reds number three, the Pirates 4, and the Cardinals a distant 5th. But
yep,
I'll say this, and I've kind of said this thing before, and again, it's bit me. I think the gap between the Pirates and what the Cardinals will do will be bigger than the gap between the Pirates and the Cubs and Brewers.
You think the distance between the Pirates and the Cardinals will be bigger than the Pirates and the Cubs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the Pirates are more competitive than I think a lot of people think. But again, are
the Cardinals on pace for like a Colorado Rockies type year?
No, I don't think they'll be that bad. I don't think they'll be that bad. But I think there's a good chance. If I'm reading the tea leaves right, it feels like the Cardinals are. This is just Sonny Gray was just the starting point.
100%.
I feel like they're going to move a lot of guys, and I feel like, especially with pitching wise, I felt like the Cardinals really skated by with bad pitching last year, and I feel like it's going to kind of come back to bite them. And we've seen the Reds, man. When you don't have a rotation that's remotely competitive, you can easily lose 100 games. So I don't know if the Cardinals lose 100 games, but I think the Cardinals will lose at least 90 games.
Yeah, their projected starting rotation right now: Matthew Liberatore, Andre Palante, Michael McGreevy, Richard Fitz, and Kyle Leahy.
Yeah, like that's what
it's a
point, man.
It's a combined. They combined less than 7 years of MLB service time between all 5 of them.
Yeah.
And Andre Palante is the most at 3.145. Matthew Liberatore at 2.14. Kyle Leahy at 1.14. And then Fitz and McGreevy both less than 1. I mean, talk about a rotation that is in desperate need of some veteran presence. Whew. That is not good. And then, Tink Hens will compete for a spot. Quinn Matthews will compete for a spot. But yeah, I mean, it's not looking good for the Cardinals. And then when you look at their starting 9, it doesn't look that great either. Brendan Donovan, Ivan Herrera, Alec Burleson, Wilson Contreras is maybe going to be moved. I don't know what the plans are there for Contreras. Mason Wynn, Lars Nootbaar has been thrown around as a trade target. Nolan Arenado, certainly if he waives his trade clause. Pedro Pages and Victor Scott, their projected starting 9 with a bench of Pozo, Gorman, Fermin, and Walker. Certainly doesn't strike a ton of fear into the hearts of opponents.
No, I don't think so.
All right, final thoughts on the NL Central in 2026, Nick.
No, I mean, I think it'll be another very competitive division. I think, between the top 4, I'm not gonna say anyone can win it. Just I think that the Pirates winning it is pretty hard. And honestly, even the Reds, I think the Reds could win it. I don't think that it's impossible, but a lot of things would happen.
Sitting here today that the Reds have the pieces in place to win.
They would need a lot of things to go right. I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I think that the Reds could take it. The Reds have a lot of players that could take a big leap next season, and I think people are not as. I think there's 2 things here, Craig. I think that there's plenty of reason to be disappointed if the Reds don't go out and add a Kyle Schwarber or add a legitimate big time bat. Like, I think, like, man, like, there's an opportunity here and you should seize it. But I think just because we should be disappointed doesn't mean that this team doesn't also have a lot of talent. And this is going to be, even as it stands right now, one of the better Reds teams on paper of the last 25 years. I mean, you go look through the previous like odds of winning a World Series. I think the Reds right now, as it stands, at like the 4th or 5th best odds of winning a World Series since like 2000 of any team, any Reds team. And I don't think a lot of people will really feel that. Like, this is still one of the better teams. So I don't think I can say that, but I also don't think the Reds are as far off from that if things went right for them as people think.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how things play out. The Cincinnati Reds, certainly have a chance to make some noise, but I think it's going to require them to make a move. I don't think they can sit here and expect on early December with the team that they have right now that they can be competitive, but we'll see. Cincinnati Reds, as of right now, at least to win the World Series, 30-1, which is a lot better than the Pittsburgh Pirates 150-1 odds, according to ESPN. So we'll see. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you drop us a like on this video. Give us a 5-star review if you're listening to this on the podcast version. We certainly appreciate that. And if you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment below. Let us know what you think the final standings for the NL Central will be in 2026 as well. Nick, there's a lot of Chatterbox sports content on the horizon. What do we got coming up?
Yeah, lots of other content this week. Obviously, it's Crosstown Shootout Week, so there'll be a lot of content on that, on Off the Bench and the Stone Shield Show. Those run 10 a.m. to noon, Monday through Friday. Chatterbox Bearcats. We'll have a lot of other content. Chatterbox Bengals, lots of other content as well. So, be sure to tune in.
That's right. Chatterbox Bengals will be having a live watch party on Sunday as the Bengals travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills at Smoke Justice. Reed, Casey, and the gang will be there for a live pregame show starting at 12:30. So we hope you can join us there at Smoke Justice in Covington. But for Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. That'll do it for this edition of Chatterbox Reds. Drop us a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications, and we'll be sure to see you next time.